My name is Evelyn, 29 years old, and at 2 a.m. I was cleaning the executive boardroom when I saw the ownership transfer documents spread across the mahogany table. 5 years of mopping these floors while my sister Brittany got corner offices and company cars. The papers showed everything, the entire $68 million company going to her while my name appeared nowhere. I dropped my mop, water splashing across those documents, and decided right then I was done being invisible. Before we dive into how I went from janitor to CEO of my own company, let me know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe because this story will show you that sometimes the best revenge is massive success. What happens when the invisible daughter finally steps into the light? Let's find out together. Growing up as Harold and Dorothy's firstborn should have meant something, but from the moment Brittany arrived 2 years after me, I became background noise in my own family's symphony. While I spent nights mastering calculus and economics, my parents attended every single one of Brittany's dance recitals, cheerleading competitions, and social gatherings. The day I won the state science fair with my logistics optimization project, they were busy planning Brittany's Sweet 16 party. When I gave my valedictorian speech to a crowd of hundreds, my parents' seats remained empty because Brittany had a minor role in the school play that same evening. The acceptance letter from MIT should have changed everything. Full scholarship for business and logistics management, one of only 50 students selected nationwide for the program. I remember running into the kitchen, waving the letter, my heart pounding with excitement. Mom barely looked up from her magazine, muttering something about hoping I wouldn't get too full of myself. Dad glanced at it and said scholarships were for people who couldn't afford things on their own, as if my academic achievement was somehow shameful. 2 months later, when Brittany got accepted to the local community college for communications, they threw a party that lasted all weekend, invited family from 3 states, and Dad gave a speech about how proud he was of his little princess. During my MIT years, I discovered something that would later save our family company from complete ruin. Through my advanced logistics courses and internships with Fortune 500 companies, I could see massive flaws in how our family's logistics business operated. Every semester break when I came home, I noticed more inefficiencies, more money bleeding from preventable mistakes. Senior year, I spent 3 months creating a comprehensive analysis and restructuring plan. I presented it to my father in his home office, charts and projections spread across his desk, showing how we could increase efficiency by 40% and reduce costs by millions. He listened for maybe 5 minutes before cutting me off, saying I was book smart but had no real-world experience, that running a business wasn't about theories and calculations. Graduation day came with highest honors, multiple job offers from major corporations, and professors recommending me for executive training programs. I turned them all down because despite everything, I believed family meant something. I believed if I proved myself within our company, they'd finally see my worth. When I asked Dad about a position, he leaned back in his leather chair and offered me a job in maintenance. Start from the bottom, he said, learn how real business works. Meanwhile, Brittany waltzed in with her communications degree and was immediately named Vice President of Marketing, complete with a corner office overlooking the city and an assistant who'd been with the company longer than she'd been alive. I took the janitor position. Every night I cleaned those offices, emptied trash bins full of wasted opportunities, mopped floors while studying financial reports left carelessly on desks. I memorized every client contract, understood every supply chain weakness, identified every place where money disappeared into inefficiency. My colleagues in maintenance, Rosa and Malcolm, became my unexpected allies. They saw me working equations on napkins during breaks, noticed when I'd reorganize supply closets using advanced inventory management principles. Rosa once asked why someone with my education was pushing a mop. I told her I was learning the business from the ground up. She shook her head sadly and said some people start at the ground and never get to climb. 5 years passed this way. 5 years of watching Brittany take credit for improvements that mysteriously appeared after I'd cleaned certain offices. 5 years of Dorothy telling family friends that at least one daughter had business sense, while poor Evelyn found her calling in honest custodial work. 5 years of Harold promoting everyone except me, while I submitted anonymous suggestions that transformed department after department. The worst part wasn't the disrespect or the menial labor. It was knowing that every night I held the solutions to problems that cost us millions, and every day they treated me like I was worth less than the mop in my hands. But I kept working, kept hoping, kept believing that eventually merit would matter more than their preconceptions. I should have known better. I should have realized that in their eyes, I would never be more than the daughter who didn't shine quite bright enough, no matter how many fires I secretly put out or how many times I saved them from their own incompetence. 3 years into my janitorial career, our family company faced the kind of crisis that destroys legacies. I discovered it the way I discovered everything important, through the carelessness of executives who never noticed the woman emptying their waste baskets. Financial statements left on printers, emergency board meeting notes in recycling bins, panicked emails on screens that stayed logged in after hours. We were hemorrhaging nearly $2 million monthly, contracts falling through like water through a sieve, and our biggest clients threatening to jump ship. The company my grandfather built from nothing, that my father inherited at its peak worth $40 million, was 6 months from bankruptcy. My real work began at midnight when the offices emptied and I could access the systems without suspicion. Malcolm from IT had noticed me helping him troubleshoot network issues using knowledge no janitor should possess. Instead of reporting me, he quietly gave me temporary access codes, understanding something bigger was happening. Night after night, I traced every financial leak, mapped every logistics failure, identified every process that turned profit into loss. The routing system was a disaster, sending trucks on journeys that burned fuel and time. Our warehouse management belonged in the previous century, with inventory disappearing into black holes of mismanagement. Vendor relationships were toxic, built on handshakes and tradition rather than performance metrics. I spent 4 months creating the solution while everyone slept. Comprehensive restructuring plans typed on the break room computer, financial projections calculated between toilet cleanings, new routing algorithms designed on paper towels. Every component had to be perfect because I'd only get one shot. The anonymous reports I left on Harold's desk were works of art disguised as consultant findings. 40 pages detailing exactly how to save the company, written in language that made him feel like the smartest person in the room for understanding it. I even created fake letterhead from a fictitious consulting firm, knowing his ego would never let him implement ideas from his janitor daughter. The transformation was remarkable to watch from my position pushing a vacuum. Harold strutted through the offices waving my plans like they were his own divine inspiration. Department heads scrambled to implement changes they didn't fully understand but couldn't argue with. Within 6 months, bleeding stopped. Within a year, profits soared. Within 18 months, we'd secured contracts worth more than the company had ever seen. The valuation jumped from $20 million at the crisis point to $45 million, then $60 million, finally settling at $68 million by year 2 of my shadow restructuring. Brittany became the golden child of an even more golden company. At company meetings I watched while cleaning windows, she'd stand at the podium taking credit for inspiring a culture of innovation. She'd never read a single report, couldn't explain any of the changes, but she had the face and name that made success stories sellable. Dorothy would beam from the audience, telling anyone who'd listen how Brittany's fresh perspective saved the family legacy. Harold promoted her to executive vice president, joking that business genius clearly skipped a generation when it came to me. The local business journal ran a feature on her titled Beauty and Brains, how Brittany transformed her family's fortune. The truth lived in dangerous corners where family politics feared to tread. Cousin Derek, our CFO, figured it out when he found my handwriting on original drafts mistakenly left in the scanner. He compared timestamps, traced the anonymous emails to times only I was in the building, and confronted me in the supply closet. His words still burn, "Keep your mouth shut, and I'll keep mine shut." Rock the boat, and I'll make sure you're not just a janitor, but unemployable anywhere in this state. Uncle Stan, the COO, was more subtle. He'd watch me during family gatherings with knowing eyes, occasionally muttering about how some people were too smart for their own good. I documented everything obsessively. Screenshots of my late-night logins, photos of my handwritten drafts before transforming them into anonymous reports, recordings of meetings where they discussed implementing plans. Rosa helped me organize evidence, spending her breaks creating backup files on drives she kept at home. Malcolm ensured my access logs were preserved on systems they'd never think to check. We all knew this day would come, when the truth would matter more than comfort, when being invisible would no longer be sustainable. The final insult came at the company's victory celebration. 200 guests toasting Brittany's brilliance, while I scrubbed champagne stains from marble floors. Harold gave a speech about vision and leadership, about how some people are born to lead while others serve vital support roles. He looked directly at me while saying it, ensuring I understood my place in his narrative. That night, cleaning confetti from the boardroom where they'd celebrated my work as someone else's triumph, I made myself a promise. Someday, somehow, they would know exactly whose shoulders they'd been standing on. They would understand that the janitor they dismissed had been the architect of their salvation. The succession planning meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, and like every major company decision, I wasn't invited to participate, only to clean up afterward. Hidden in the adjacent supply closet with the door cracked open, I listened to my family casually erase any possibility of my future. Harold's voice boomed with pride as he announced the formal transfer of ownership to Brittany, calling her the only one with true business acumen, the natural heir to our family's legacy. The legal documents were already drawn up, waiting only for signatures to make official what had always been emotional reality. I was invisible even in legal terms, my existence reduced to a footnote in the employee registry. Dorothy's contribution cut deeper than any knife could reach. She actually laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass, as she told the assembled board members how fortunate they were that at least one daughter inherited the business gene. Poor Evelyn, she said, just wasn't cut out for this world, but wasn't it wonderful she'd found her calling in custodial work where she could contribute within her capabilities. The room chuckled politely at my expense while I pressed record on my phone, needing evidence that this wasn't just another nightmare but my lived reality. Brittany's acceptance speech dripped with false modesty and real venom. She thanked everyone for believing in her vision, for supporting her through the challenging transformation years, and made special mention of how some people knew their place in the corporate ecosystem. Looking directly at the closet where she suspected I might be listening, she added that not everyone could be leaders, that the world needed people willing to clean up after visionaries. The board applauded while I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. Uncle Stan's weak attempt at fairness felt like watching someone throw a tissue at a forest fire. He suggested perhaps I should receive something, maybe a small ownership stake or a retirement fund contribution, acknowledging my years of service. Harold's response was swift and brutal. I had steady employment, health insurance, and a predictable schedule. What more could someone in my position want? The discussion moved on before Stan could respond, his moment of conscience crushed under the weight of family hierarchy. Cousin Derek's betrayal stung with calculated precision. As CFO, he presented financial projections showing how Brittany's leadership would take the company to new heights, conveniently forgetting who'd created the systems making those projections possible. He actively argued against any ownership distribution that might complicate the clear chain of command Brittany represented. His PowerPoint slides included an organizational chart where my name appeared in tiny font at the bottom, barely visible, exactly how they saw me. Aunt Marie, Harold's sister who'd always shown me small kindnesses, suggested a cash payout might be appropriate, something to recognize my loyalty if not my contributions. The room fell silent as Harold's face darkened. He explained with patronizing patience that giving me money I hadn't earned would only enable my lack of ambition. Better to keep me employed where I could maintain dignity through honest work than insult me with charity. Marie shrank back into her chair, another small voice silenced by Harold's authority. The meeting concluded with champagne toasts to the future while I remained frozen in my hiding spot, processing the finality of their decision. $68 million built on my midnight algorithms and secret solutions, handed to someone who couldn't read a balance sheet without assistance. They filed out discussing dinner reservations and golf plans, leaving me alone with the bitter knowledge that no amount of proving myself would ever be enough. 20 minutes later, as I entered the boardroom to clean their celebration, Brittany waited for me like a predator savoring wounded prey. She gestured at the champagne stains on the conference table, the scattered papers documenting her inheritance, and told me to be extra thorough since this room now belonged to someone who mattered. While I cleaned, she described her plans for the company, each idea more disconnected from reality than the last. She wanted to expand into markets we couldn't serve, acquire companies we couldn't afford, implement strategies that would undo everything I'd built. When I remained silent, focused on my work, she grew crueler, demanding I look at her while she spoke, reminding me that soon she'd have the power to fire anyone who didn't show proper respect. That night, I composed my resignation letter with the same attention to detail I'd given those anonymous reports. Every word chosen for maximum impact, every sentence crafted to shatter their comfortable delusions. I included copies of my MIT transcripts, screenshots of my late-night system access, photos of my handwritten drafts next to the anonymous reports they'd celebrated. The letter was my declaration of independence, my refusal to remain invisible any longer. As I printed it on the same letterhead they'd used to announce Brittany's promotion, I felt something shift inside me. The hope I'd carried for 5 years finally died, replaced by something harder and more useful. Determination. My resignation letter hit the company email system at 6 a.m. Monday morning, sent to every employee from janitor to executive, and within hours it became the only thing anyone could talk about. 48 pages of documented evidence showing how the janitor they'd ignored had saved them from bankruptcy, complete with timestamps, financial projections, and side-by-side comparisons of my original work and the anonymous reports that transformed the company. The subject line read simply, "The truth about your success," and by noon, printed copies were circulating through every department like underground manifestos. Malcolm from IT was the first to verify my claims publicly. He sent his own company-wide email detailing my late-night system access logs, showing how every major improvement coincided with my overnight shifts. He included security camera stills of me working at computers, creating reports, running calculations on the breakroom whiteboard at 3 a.m. His conclusion was damning in its simplicity. The woman you paid minimum wage to clean toilets was actually running shadow operations that increased company value by $48 million. Rosa from maintenance followed with her testimony, revealing how she'd watched me redesign the warehouse system using napkin sketches during lunch breaks. She'd implemented my ideas quietly, testing them in small sections before the anonymous reports made them company policy. Her team had always wondered why an MIT graduate was pushing mops. Now they understood they'd been working alongside a genius forced to hide her light under industrial cleaning supplies. She announced her resignation effective immediately, refusing to work for people who could waste such talent. James from accounting had kept his suspicions quiet for years, but my letter gave him permission to speak. He revealed finding my financial projections in the recycling, recognizing the sophisticated modeling no janitor should know. He'd watched Harold claim credit for ideas that appeared mysteriously after I'd cleaned his office. The forensic accounting he'd done on his own time proved that every major financial decision that saved or made money traced back to nights I was in the building. His resignation came with a promise to testify if I ever needed legal support. By Wednesday, 15 key employees had submitted resignations, each with their own story of knowing or suspecting the truth. The head of logistics admitted my routing algorithms had saved her department. The procurement manager confessed he'd implemented my vendor strategies, thinking they came from expensive consultants. The junior executives who'd built careers on systems I designed felt betrayed by leadership that would bury such talent for petty reasons. They weren't just leaving jobs, they were abandoning a company culture that could treat brilliance like garbage. Brittany's response was a case study in privileged panic. She called an emergency all-hands meeting where she alternated between threats and bribes, promising promotions to anyone who stayed, threatening legal action against anyone who left. Her PowerPoint presentation about loyalty and family values crashed halfway through because she didn't know how to restart it without IT support. Watching her fumble with basic technology while preaching about leadership would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Harold's attempt at damage control revealed the depth of his delusion. He sent a memo dismissing my claims as the desperate fantasies of a disgruntled employee who couldn't accept her limitations. He suggested I'd stolen credit for collaborative efforts, that cleaning offices gave me access to overhear ideas I was now claiming as my own. The more he wrote, the more desperate he sounded, especially when he couldn't explain why a simple janitor would even understand the complex systems being discussed. His final line about maintaining professional standards while his company hemorrhaged talent became an instant meme in industry circles. Dorothy's public statement to local media made everything worse. She painted me as an unstable daughter jealous of her sister's success, someone who'd turned a generous job offer into an excuse for bitterness. She actually told reporters that some people were meant for service roles and should be grateful for the opportunity. The interview went viral for all the wrong reasons, with business leaders nationwide condemning the waste of human potential her words represented. The hashtag #JustAJanitor started trending as people shared their own stories of being underestimated. Uncle Stan finally showed his true colors when he called me personally, not to apologize but to negotiate. He offered me a consultant position if I'd stop the exodus and sign a non-disclosure agreement. When I refused, he threatened to ensure I'd never work in logistics again, that the family had connections I couldn't imagine. I recorded the call, adding it to my growing collection of evidence showing how deep the rot went. His final words about family loyalty being more important than truth told me everything about why he'd stayed silent for years. By Friday, the company was in freefall. Departments couldn't function without the people who actually understood the systems. Clients called asking about the mass resignations, concerned about service continuity. 3 major contracts worth $12 million annually were put on review, pending reassurance that operations would continue smoothly. The stock price for their public subsidiary dropped 15% in 3 days. Financial reporters started investigating the story of the janitor, whose resignation letter triggered a corporate crisis. The most satisfying moment came when security footage leaked showing Brittany trying to understand the routing software I designed. She spent 4 hours clicking randomly, growing increasingly frustrated, finally throwing a keyboard across the room when she realized she had no idea how to do the job she'd claimed to be perfect for. The video spread through industry networks, becoming a cautionary tale about nepotism and the danger of promoting image over ability. Watching her empire crumble because she'd never bothered to learn the actual business felt like poetic justice delivered by reality itself. The call from Jade came at exactly the right moment, 3 days after my resignation, when I was sitting in my empty apartment wondering if I'd just destroyed my future along with my past. We'd been roommates at MIT, and she'd followed my career with growing frustration, watching my brilliance wasted on people who couldn't see past their prejudices. Now a successful venture capitalist, she'd been waiting for this moment, preparing an offer that would change everything. Her first words were simple yet powerful. "It's time to show them what you can really do." The investor meeting she arranged felt like entering an alternate universe where competence mattered more than connections. 12 venture capitalists sat around a table actually listening as I explained my vision for a logistics company built on efficiency and innovation rather than tradition and nepotism. They'd already reviewed my work, seen the anonymous reports that saved my family's company, understood the systems that transformed a dying business into a $68 million success story. When I finished presenting, the room erupted in something I'd never experienced in 5 years of cleaning offices, genuine applause for my ideas. The funding offer exceeded my wildest dreams. $5 million in seed capital, with commitments for another $20 million based on performance milestones. They weren't just investing in a business plan, they were investing in proven ability to transform logistics operations. Jade's firm would lead, but 6 other major funds wanted involvement. The term sheets included everything I'd need, including warehouse space, technology infrastructure, and connections to potential clients. More importantly, they offered something my family never had: belief in my capabilities. Invisible Lines Logistics was more than a company name, it was a philosophy. Every person who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored would find a home where contribution mattered more than connections. The 12 employees who'd followed me from the family company formed the core leadership team. Malcolm became Chief Technology Officer, building systems that made my midnight sketches into digital reality. Rosa headed operations, her decades of practical experience finally paired with resources to implement best practices. James led finance with the integrity Harold's company had always lacked. The office space we leased sat directly across from my family's headquarters, a deliberate choice that sent a clear message. From my CEO office, I could see the executive floor where they'd planned my exclusion, the boardroom where they'd toasted Brittany's inheritance, even the supply closet where I'd hidden while they dismantled my dreams. But I spent little time looking backward, too busy building something better. Every hire was someone whose talent had been wasted elsewhere, every policy designed to reward innovation over politics. Our first major client came through personal relationships built during my janitor years. The procurement manager at Clearwater Industries had always wondered why the cleaning lady understood supply chain optimization better than their consultants. When news broke about my real identity and new company, he called immediately. Their contract, worth $4 million annually, would normally take months of negotiation. We settled it in 2 weeks because I could demonstrate exactly how to save them 30% on logistics costs using systems I'd perfected while everyone thought I was mopping floors. The second and third clients were direct defections from Harold's company. They'd only stayed because the systems I'd built worked too well to abandon. Now that they knew who really created those efficiencies, switching to Invisible Lines was an easy decision. Metropolitan Retail's CEO told reporters she felt deceived learning that the innovations she'd praised came from someone treated like disposable labor. When asked about loyalty to the established company, she responded that real loyalty meant supporting talent wherever it flourished. The media coverage transformed from business news to cultural phenomenon. The story of the janitor who built a competing empire captured imaginations across industries. Forbes ran a feature titled "From Mop to CEO: The Price of Prejudice in American Business," complete with side-by-side photos of me cleaning offices and signing million-dollar contracts. LinkedIn posts about recognizing hidden talent in organizations went viral as executives publicly committed to looking beyond traditional hierarchies. My TED Talk invitation came with a handwritten note from the organizer who'd been overlooked for promotions before starting her own successful firm. Harold's legal threats arrived exactly when expected, claiming I'd stolen trade secrets and violated non-compete agreements. The cease and desist letters made impressive wallpaper for our break room where former employees could laugh at the desperation. Our legal team, led by a woman who'd been passed over for partner at 3 firms before starting her own practice, responded with beautiful precision. No court would support claims that a janitor had access to proprietary information, and I'd never signed any agreements limiting my future employment because they'd never considered me important enough to restrict. The industry awards started arriving within 6 months. Innovation in Logistics winner, Startup of the Year finalist, Best New Company Culture champion. Each trophy displayed in our lobby represented validation my family had denied for years. But the real victory was watching my team thrive in an environment where ideas mattered more than image. The warehouse worker who suggested a revolutionary inventory system got promoted and profit sharing, not patronizing dismissal. The accountant who found cost savings received recognition and advancement, not anonymous absorption of her work. By month 8, Invisible Lines Logistics had secured contracts worth $32 million, employed 70 people, and maintained profit margins that made established companies envious. We weren't just succeeding, we were setting new standards for how logistics companies could operate. The business model I'd sketched on paper towels during break became Harvard Business School case studies. The routing algorithms I designed at 3 a.m. were licensed to companies nationwide. Everything they'd said I couldn't do, I was doing at levels they couldn't imagine. The invisible daughter had become impossible to ignore. The quarterly reports from Harold's company read like a countdown to disaster, each worse than the last as the reality of Brittany's incompetence met the harsh judgments of the market. 6 months after my exodus, they'd lost 60% of their clients, not to competitors offering better prices, but to a fundamental inability to deliver services at the standards I'd secretly maintained. The routing systems I designed required understanding of logic Brittany had never bothered to learn. The vendor relationships needed nurturing she considered beneath her. And the financial models demanded attention to detail that conflicted with her 3-hour lunch schedule. The numbers were brutal in their honesty. Company valuation dropped from $68 million to $40 million in the first quarter after my departure, then to $32 million by the second quarter. By month 6, independent auditors assessed the company at $25 million, and that was being generous about assets that might never recover their value. The algorithms I'd built still functioned, but without understanding the principles behind them, Brittany's team made modifications that turned efficiency into chaos. Trucks arrived at wrong destinations, inventory disappeared into administrative black holes, and client complaints multiplied faster than they could be addressed. Dorothy's first phone call came on a Tuesday evening, 6 months and 3 days after she'd laughed about my limitations in the boardroom. Her voice shook with desperation masked as maternal concern, asking how I was doing, mentioning she'd heard about my little startup, wondering if we could meet for coffee to catch up. When I asked what prompted this sudden interest in my well-being, the silence stretched until she finally admitted they needed help. The company was struggling, and perhaps I could consult part-time while keeping my current ventures. I told her my consulting rate was $50,000 per week with a 12-week minimum contract, payment up front. She hung up without saying goodbye. The criminal investigation into Derek's embezzlement became public when federal agents raided the corporate offices, carrying out boxes of financial records in full view of local media. Apparently, when the company started hemorrhaging money, our CFO cousin decided to secure his own future by transferring funds to offshore accounts. The investigation revealed he'd been skimming for years, but my systems had hidden the losses through increased efficiency. Without those safeguards, his theft became obvious as departments couldn't explain massive shortfalls. His arrest photo showed the same man who'd threatened to destroy me if I spoke up, now facing 20 years for financial fraud. Uncle Stan's resignation letter leaked to the press, a masterpiece of corporate blame-shifting that fooled no one. He claimed he'd been misled about company operations, that he'd trusted reports without verifying their accuracy, that family loyalty had clouded his business judgment. What he didn't mention were the years he'd known about my contributions while staying silent, or his attempts to threaten me into returning. His departure left Brittany without any experienced leadership, surrounded by yes-men who'd gained positions through flattery rather than ability. The CEO position remained empty because no qualified candidate wanted to board a sinking ship. Brittany's social media meltdown provided entertainment for the entire industry. Her Instagram videos trying to blame me for sabotage were studied in crisis management courses as examples of what not to do. In one memorable live stream, she claimed I'd programmed the systems to fail if I ever left, showing her complete ignorance of how technology worked. When commenters asked why a janitor would have such access, she spiraled into conspiracy theories about my secret midnight activities. The videos were saved and shared widely, her mascara-streaked face becoming a meme about nepotism's consequences. The client testimonials destroyed any credibility Harold might have salvaged. Major accounts publicly explained their departures, citing not just operational failures, but ethical concerns about a company that would waste human resources so carelessly. Clearwater Industries CEO gave an interview explaining how they discovered their innovations came from a janitor, not the executive team claiming credit. Metropolitan Retail published an open letter about values alignment, stating they couldn't support organizations that punished talent for not fitting predetermined molds. Each departure statement mentioned my company as their new logistics partner, free advertising I couldn't have bought. Jade's venture capital firm made Harold an offer that must have burned like acid. $15 million for the entire company, take it or leave it, valid for 72 hours. The terms included immediate replacement of all senior management, acknowledgement of my intellectual property contributions, and public apology for years of discriminatory treatment. Harold's pride wouldn't let him accept what he saw as surrender terms from his janitor daughter's backers. He refused, claiming the company would recover once the market recognized Brittany's potential. Even his lawyers advised accepting, warning that bankruptcy would leave him with nothing, but Harold Ashford had never listened to advice from people he considered beneath him. The bankruptcy filing came exactly 1 year after my resignation, filled with language trying to blame external forces for internal failures. They cited unexpected employee departures, market volatility, and aggressive competition from new entities, never mentioning that all these problems stemmed from their own choices. The court documents revealed Harold had personally guaranteed several business loans, meaning the failure would claim not just the company, but most of his personal assets, including the family home. The empire built across 3 generations was destroyed in 12 months by pride and prejudice. The auction of company assets felt like attending my own vindication. I bid on and won the original routing algorithm servers, the same systems I'd programmed during overnight shifts, paying $10,000 for technology worth millions when properly utilized. Rosa bought the warehouse equipment she'd helped me optimize, planning to start her own fulfillment service. Malcolm acquired the IT infrastructure at pennies on the dollar, joking that at least now he owned the computers he'd helped me access. We weren't being cruel, just practical. These tools deserved better than abandonment in bankruptcy proceedings, and we had businesses to run. 1 year after walking away from my mop and bucket, Invisible Lines Logistics was valued at $45 million, not by optimistic projections, but by serious buyers wanting to acquire what we'd built. The corner office I'd cleaned for others now bore my nameplate as CEO, the windows offering perfect views of both where I'd been and where I was going. Success wasn't just the best revenge, it was the only response that mattered to years of being invisible. Every morning, I looked at the janitor uniform I'd had professionally framed, hanging on my office wall like a diploma from the University of Harsh Reality. The meeting request from Dorothy came through Aunt Marie, who'd remained neutral throughout the family destruction. A quiet restaurant, Wednesday afternoon, just to talk without lawyers or business proposals. I agreed because closure comes in many forms, and I wanted to see what acknowledgement looked like on faces that had dismissed me for so long. They arrived together, Dorothy and Brittany, looking smaller than I remembered, wearing humility like ill-fitting clothes bought for an occasion they'd never planned to attend. Dorothy spoke first, her words carefully rehearsed, but sincere in their pain. She admitted she'd been wrong, that favoritism had destroyed not just the company, but the family itself. She'd spent months in therapy trying to understand why she'd elevated one daughter while diminishing the other, finding uncomfortable truths about her own insecurities and projected dreams. The golden child narrative had been easier than accepting both daughters as complex individuals. She asked for forgiveness, not expecting it but needing to voice the request. Her tears seemed genuine, washing away years of makeup that had hidden her true feelings. Brittany's transformation was harder to believe, but impossible to ignore. Working retail at a department store had taught her what I'd learned as a janitor, that every job has dignity and no position automatically confers wisdom. She'd finally read the reports I'd written, understood the systems I'd created, realized the depth of intelligence she'd mocked while playing executive. Her apology came with admission that she'd known about my contributions, but enjoyed the benefits too much to acknowledge them. She asked if I could really teach her, about business and leadership and building something real. My response surprised them and maybe myself. Forgiveness came easier than expected, not because they deserved it, but because carrying anger was exhausting. I offered Brittany an entry-level position at Invisible Lines, data entry with opportunity for advancement based on performance, not connections. The salary was fair, the expectations clear, and the path to success dependent entirely on her own efforts. She accepted immediately, understanding this was more generous than any inheritance she'd lost. Dorothy I couldn't employ, but I suggested volunteer work with the educational foundation I'd started, helping overlooked students find their paths. Harold remained absent from reconciliation, too proud to bend even when broken. Through lawyers, I learned he'd moved to a small apartment, working as a consultant for companies that didn't know his history. He blamed me for destroying his legacy, unable to see that I'd tried to save it for 5 years before saving myself. Some bridges burned can't be rebuilt. Some relationships are too damaged by choices to survive truth. I sent him a check for $50,000, labeled it severance pay for 5 years of janitorial work, knowing he'd cash it despite the insult, because pride tastes bitter, but poverty tastes worse. The Invisible Lines Educational Foundation launched with $10 million in funding, focused on students whose potential was hidden by circumstances or prejudice. Full scholarships to MIT and similar schools, mentorship programs pairing overlooked talent with successful professionals, internship pipelines that valued ability over connections. Every recipient heard my story, understood that their current situation didn't define their ultimate destination. The foundation's motto came from my darkest night cleaning offices. Every building needs someone willing to clean it, but never let anyone tell you that's all you can do. Company culture at Invisible Lines reflected lessons learned through pain. Innovation could come from anyone, regardless of title or tenure. The warehouse worker who suggested revolutionary inventory systems became a department head. The accountant who found cost savings received bonuses and recognition. Every bathroom had a plaque reading "Dignity in all work," reminding everyone that no honest labor was beneath respect. We hired former janitors, retail workers, food service employees, anyone who'd been told they weren't executive material, and watched them flourish when given real opportunities. The awards and recognition continued accumulating, but they mattered less than the daily victories. Watching Malcolm present at technology conferences, seeing Rosa's operations innovations studied in business schools, celebrating James's promotion to CFO of our expanding enterprise. These people had always possessed brilliance, they just needed someone to see it. My office displayed their achievements more prominently than my own, because leadership meant elevating others, not standing on their shoulders while claiming sole credit for the view. Media requests never stopped coming, everyone wanting to understand how the janitor built an empire. I accepted select interviews, always emphasizing that my story wasn't unique, that countless brilliant people were trapped in roles that wasted their potential. The book deals and movie rights generated millions more for the foundation, turning pain into purpose. Harvard Business School created a case study about our company, but more importantly, they revised admission criteria to look beyond traditional markers of potential. Change happened slowly, but it happened. Looking back from this height, I saw the journey differently than expected. The pain had been real, the dismissal devastating, the waste of potential tragic. But without those experiences, I might have become another Harold, blind to brilliance that didn't match my expectations. Every night I'd cleaned those offices taught me something about resilience. Every dismissive comment built my determination. Every moment of invisibility prepared me for the spotlight when it finally arrived. They'd called me just a janitor, and they were right. I was just a janitor who happened to also be a genius, and when they refused to see the genius, I refused to remain just anything. The company motto, "Invisible Work, Visible Impact," appeared on every business card, letterhead, and building entrance. It reminded us that all work has value when done with purpose, that visibility is earned through impact, not inheritance, that sometimes the most important contributions come from people others overlook. My janitor uniform hung in its frame, not as a symbol of shame, but as proof of survival. I'd pushed those mops with the same hands that now signed million-dollar deals. The floors I'd cleaned supported the foundation I'd built. They gave me nothing but a bucket and minimum wage, so I'd taken those tools and built something they could never imagine. The question that haunted quiet moments was whether they'd ever really understood the loss. Not just the company or the money, but the relationship we could have had if they'd seen me as I was instead of as they'd decided I should be. But perhaps that was the point. Some people need to lose everything before they can see anything clearly. I'd found my worth in spite of them, not because of them, and maybe that made it stronger. The invisible daughter had become undeniable, not through their recognition, but through her own determination to be seen. Success tastes different when you've cleaned the floors where others celebrated your erasure. It feels deeper when you've built it from discarded dreams and dismissed potential. Every achievement carried weight because I knew its true cost, measured not in dollars, but in dignity preserved despite attempts to strip it away. They'd thought they were teaching me humility by making me a janitor. Instead, they'd taught me that humility and brilliance could coexist, that no job defined your worth, and that sometimes the best response to being underestimated was to build something so undeniable that even blindness had to acknowledge the light. Thank you for joining me on this journey from janitor to CEO. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, I want to hear from you in the comments. What talents are you hiding because others can't see past their assumptions? Who in your life deserves recognition they're not getting? Share your experiences below, and let's build a community where invisible work gets the visibility it deserves. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about overcoming obstacles and claiming your worth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their current circumstances don't define their ultimate destination. Remember, you're not just anything, you're everything you choose to become, regardless of who sees it first. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep believing in yourself, and never let anyone's blindness dim your light.